Okay, looking at this picture, the top is motor descending tracts. So your descending tracts, what kind of information is that going to be? Efferent or afferent? Efferent, good. And somatosensory is going to be your ascending tract, so that's going to be your afferent information coming in. Okay. Today, like I said, I'm going to talk about all the stuff that's in here. First, I'm going to draw it from this lateral view, and this is actually kind of a sagittal section, except I put the central sulcus here. Ordinarily, central sulcus, you wouldn't be able to see it if I did a sagittal section, right? So just looking at a sagittal section, it's my cortical region. Here's my central sulcus. I'll just label that. Yeah. All right. This is my thalamus. We talked about that before. And back here we have cerebellum. Okay, and then here's my spinal cord. Okay, and then different regions of the spinal cord. This side view is just going to look at all of the things that we're expecting to be in the spinal cord, both somatosensory information and motor information. What I'd like to do is go ahead and start with the somatosensory information coming in, the afferent information, and for that, what we talked about before is the two somatosensory so the somatosensory information coming in, we talked about two different tracks. Does anybody remember what somatosensory information we talked about? Go ahead, Ben. Yeah. So those are going to be the spinal thalamic tract, and what's the other one? DCML. Yeah. Correct. Dorsal column medial lemniscus, or DCML for short. Okay. So those are the two basic somatosensory tracts that are going to be really important moving forward. Okay. And what you should know about those two tracts, they carry very different information. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But essentially, the somatosensory information is going to come up, come here through the thalamus. Again, this is a great big overview. We're going to get in a lot more detail later on. And then it's going to deliver the information here to this region. Does anybody remember what the region is here that I'm connecting this somatosensory information to? Good. That's the post-central sulcus, or somatosensory cortex, primary somatosensory cortex. Okay, does everybody see what's happening? Okay, so if we do a cross-section of the spinal cord, we definitely expect to see both DCML and STT in there. We're going to do that later. As far as other information, like I said, the somatosensory information coming in, this is conscious information, right? It's conscious because it's going up to the level of the cortex, right? Your cortex is involved in that awareness or consciousness. So you can think about it. This is conscious information coming in. There's also some non-conscious information coming in, okay? And that non-conscious information coming in, it's going to just represent the dendrites coming in. That information is going to come in to the spinal cord and then come up and transmit information into the cerebellum. Okay, about the smear. So this is going to be non-conscious information coming in. Okay, the non-conscious information coming in that we're going to talk about as time goes on are two separate afferent tracts. Okay, there's going to be the dorsal, D-O-R-S-A-L, spinocerebellar tract, and then we're also going to have, in addition to the dorsal, there's going to be a ventral spinocerebellar tract. Yes?
Can you say that again?
Absolutely. The dorsal, D-O-R-S-A-L, spinocerebellar. So spino, S-P-I-N-O, and then cerebellar.
And then ventral spinocerebellar.
And then ventral spine. So you're going to have a dorsal spinocerebellar and a ventral spinocerebellar tract. And I'm mentioning these, again, this is a big 360 overview. We'll talk about these in a whole lot more detail when we get to the cerebellar portion of the course. In addition, when we do the cross-section through the spinal cord, we're going to bring those up again. Okay? But for right now, you need to know that those two tracts, both of them carry the same information. It's non-conscious, it's actually non-conscious proprioception information, and I'll write that here. So both of these tracts carry non-conscious proprioception. It's not conscious because it's not going up to the level of the cortex. It's just heading over to the cerebellum. Questions about, yes? So, if I think I understand your question. Let me know if I can give you an answer, and we'll get to it. The dorsal and ventral have to do with their position in the spinal cord proper. Okay? So when we actually do a cross section through the spinal cord, I'll draw one, actually part of the lateral column system, but one a little bit more dorsal and the other a little bit more ventral. So that's why they're named. It has nothing to do with.
Okay, so it's not due to body position.
Not in body position at all. It's due to the position in the spinal cord. That's how they're named.
The proprioception of the arm is inferior to like
So, proprioception of the arm, there's two kinds. Remember, TCML, which we'll talk about here in a minute, carries that conscious proprioception. That's very different than the non-conscious proprioception is just transmitted to the spinal cord. So, for example, the non-conscious proprioception is information that you're not even aware of, but it's constantly happening. Your cerebellum is aware of where all your joints are in three-dimensional space at all times, without thought. That's the non-conscious information. Okay? That help? Okay, any other questions? Okay, so that's it for the afferent information. Those are the ascending tracts. Okay, now we're going to talk about, you can see that, we're going to talk about the main motor tract. Okay, we're going to start with let's go ahead and say, here in this area, remember that's the precentral gyrus. Remember there in the precentral gyrus, you have neuronal cell body. Okay, that neuronal cell body, now we're talking about the motor tracts, the motor system, sends out an axon that travels all the way down through the medulla, midbrain, pons, and medulla, all the way down, and then, yes?
Does it go through the thalamus? Or
No, it does not. Yeah, I tried to draw it so it was a little bit in front of, but, and like I said, this is a great big overview. We're going to talk in excruciating detail about exactly what happens. Okay. Okay.
The only type of development there is.
Oh, it's painful actually with the amount of detail. So you'll get every little picture, every little piece. I promise you. Okay. So this is your main motor tract. Okay, that's going to be your main motor information. Remember we talked about motor being a two neuron system. But in general, this is responsible for all of skeletal muscles. Okay. That's going to innervate your skeletal muscles. So all the movement that's responsible, this happens in your body, starts up in your precentral gyrus like we talked about, and then transmits all the way through. So we know that if we do a cross section of the spinal cord, we're going to see that main tract. Does anybody know what that main tract? Go ahead. I haven't broken it up yet, but I will here in a minute. But that main tract overall coming down through the central nervous system has a name, and that's called your corticospinal tract. You remember that? Oh, good. That's your corticospinal tract. Okay. Okay, that's going to be the main. That one's coming from the level of the cortex, so it's voluntary movement. It's conscious voluntary movement. Okay, that's going to be the main motor tract that you're going to be responsible for, especially as a PT. Questions? Everybody good? Okay, moving on. In the midbrain, we're moving on down to the not conscious awareness tracts that you need to be aware of. Here in the midbrain, you have this thing I've drawn before. Kind of keep it the same color throughout. Okay, you have this special nucleus. It's called the red nucleus. And it's present in the midbrain. Keep it that maroon color because it goes with other sort of. Okay. This from the red nucleus, there are axons descending down through the brainstem, through the spinal cord. We're going to see it, and they're coming out. And this red nucleus is going to be responsible in humans, anyway, for two different things. In humans, it's upper extremity, specifically elbow flexion or flexors. It's going to innervate elbow flexors. Okay, and the other thing it's responsible for is just a general muscle tone. So normal muscle tone. If the red nucleus is working, doing its job properly, you have what's known as normal muscle tone. We'll talk more about what that means in neurorehab. That's a neurorehab question. Okay, so two general things. In humans, upper red nucleus is responsible for delivering information to elbow flexors, upper extremity flexors, as well as general muscle tone. And this tract that it delivers all the way down through here is known as the rubro for red, spinal tract. Rubro, R-U-B-R-O, spinal tract. Okay, yes, Alicia. Not conscious, yeah. It's coming out of the midbrain, so it's not coming from the cortical region. Something you don't have any control over. Okay, moving on down. So we have the midbrain, and then coming on down here, the level of the pons, we're going to talk about another important nucleus later in the course. And I'm going to draw it like a little kite. Here it exists in the pons, and that is your vestibular nucleus. Remember, nucleus is nothing more than a collection of gray matter in the CNS, right, just an island. Okay? And coming out of the vestibular nucleus, you're going to have axons that come on down and are responsible for innervating extensor musculature. Particularly postural extensors. So think paraspinal muscles, glute max, quads. Okay, things that hold you up against gravity. This is a big one for me when I'm working with patients who I can't communicate with. I know that if I get them upright against gravity, just by using this tract, it's automatic. I will get their extensor musculature to fire. Yes, Paul?
That's typing to the extensor musculature?
Extensor musculature. Yeah, it's a little blurry up here. I don't know why. You get extensors to fire. Just by getting somebody up against gravity, you're going to get their extensor musculature to fire. Even without them thinking about it or doing anything. Okay, so we go from, in midbrain you have the red nucleus, cerebrospinal tract, coming from the vestibular nucleus, coming down to the spinal cord, you have extensor muscular. That is your vestibulospinal tract. Do you guys have a question? No?
I forgot which bottom one is, the orange one.
This one?
Yes.
Extensor musculature. And that tract that carries that information from the vestibular nucleus down the spinal cord is known as your vestibulo. V-E-S-T-I-B-U-L-O, spinal tract. Okay, that makes sense. You operate against gravity, so you want your extensors to fire so you don't fall over. It's an automatic. Do you have a question, Sophie? No? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. You're welcome to ask. I don't mind. The last one we're going to talk about, and I'll keep it in a similar color, bless you, is going to be another one that's going to be important for just general awareness. There's something that exists in the area of the midbrain, and these are just a diffuse body of nuclei that are here in, I'm sorry, did I say midbrain? Medulla. They're here in the medulla. Just a diffuse body of nuclei in the medulla. Okay. They are known as your reticular, R-E-T-I-C-U-L-A-R formation. Your reticular formation are nothing more than a diffuse body of nuclei that exists in your medulla that sort of acts like an off-on switch for your awareness or consciousness. Okay, so if you're aware and conscious, your reticular formation is working. Yes.
Can you repeat that one more time, like the name and what it does?
Sure. The name of this is a diffuse body of nuclei that's located in the medulla, and its function is awareness or awakeness, consciousness. So remember. Last week we did levels of consciousness. So if somebody's in a coma, their reticular formation isn't working. Kind of like an off-on switch for the conscious awareness. Okay, coming out of the reticular formation, you're going to have axons here traveling down the spinal cord, and then innervating, again, extensor musculature. So I'll just say extensor muscles. If you had to guess, does anybody want to venture a guess as to what this one's called? Yeah, this is the reticulospinal tract, exactly. That is your reticulospinal tract. So all these tracts are nothing more than similar information traveling from a point of origin to a point of connection, and they're named for the point of origin to the point of connection. So reticulospinal, reticular formation to the spinal cord. And then you have vestibulospinal, vestibular nucleus, spinal cord. General upper extremity flexors, this is the rubrospinal tract, so red nucleus is rubro, and then corticospinal. It's just how they're named. Question, Chris?
Is the vestibular for upper extremity, or are they both the same?
So vestibular and reticulospinal are just, you should know their extensor musculature. The way to think about that is if you're conscious and aware, your extensor should be firing. It's mostly for postural extensors. So not arm, like elbow extensors as much. Not important. Yeah. So rubrospinal, upper extremity flexion. Okay, and that'll be important next year. Any other questions? Does it make sense? Like I said, these are all the tracts that we're going to talk about as far as the spinal cord is concerned. Okay, today we're going to look at it. This is just from a side view. And the next thing we're going to do is look at it from a frontal view. Yes? Elbow. Just elbow, yeah. Presentation, elbow place. Elbow wrist. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on. Going through that one, let's go on to the front view. Okay? This is going to be nothing more than just the frontal section. Yes?
Looking for clarification, the during nucleus
Correct. Correct. Yes. Okay, thinking about this one, this is going to be your frontal section. Sorry? Yep.
So all of the lateral contracted non-conscious livers are.
Say that, yes. But all of the non-conscious ones that you said, yes, they're all descending motor tracts. So I covered the ascending tracts. So DCML, and SCP we know about. We talked somatosensory. The new ones for somatosensory, afferent information coming in directed to the cerebellum, the dorsal and ventral spinocerebellar tracts. Okay? All of the others are motor. Most important for voluntary motor functions would be your corticospinal tract, but you should also be aware of the existence of the rubrospinal, the cerebrospinal, and reticulus. Okay? And those are all motor. Got it? Yes? Okay. Now, let's go ahead. Here's where it gets tricky. So I go over this in lots of detail because this is what I need you to get. All this stuff is super important for understanding patient presentation in the future. Okay. Again, this is going to be my standard frontal view, right? This is going to be my thalamus. Did I do something? You okay? Okay. This is going to be my thalamus. You got parathalami, right? Okay. And all we're going to do here is we're going to look at the corticospinal tract and the two somatosensory tracts we talked about, so the DCML and the SCT. Okay? And I'm going to choose to represent motor on one side and SCT on the other, or somatosensory on the other. And to be able to see what has to happen, I'm going to take and make dots to show the middle, so you can clearly see when and where things cross over to the other side. Everybody got it? Okay. And let's say let's go ahead and say this is me. So this is the right side over here, and this is going to be the left side. Right? Because if I'm facing you, that's the way we're going. Is everybody with me? Okay. Somatosensory information coming in. Let's talk about STT first. Okay. Do you remember? I hope you remember. I talked about somatosensory information coming in being a 3-neuron system. Okay. So you have this pseudo-unipolar neuron sitting here in the dorsal root ganglia. Okay, that's my neuronal cell body. And coming out of that, you have a little stalk. And then I have dendrites going out, receiving information from the environment. Okay, like I said before, this is going to be my STT, or my spinothalamic tract. Okay. Does anybody remember what the spinothalamic tract, what sensations it carries? Pain, temperature, crude touch. Perfect. Okay. Quick review. Looking at STT first. So this is going to be, this is my first order neuron. So you're going to look at a 3-neuron system. My first order neuron going to receive the information. Neuronal cell body here in the dorsal root ganglia. Okay. For STT, what happens is axons from that first order neuron enter into the spinal cord and then immediately immediately synapse with what's called the second order neuron, or the next neuron in the system. You see that? Okay. So your first order neuron for STT synapses as soon as it comes in the spinal cord, and then the second order neuron, what it does is it crosses over to the other side. Okay, so you're receiving information on your left side. Okay, as soon as the STT comes in, it synapses, and then that second order neuron crosses over. And that's what second order neurons do. They cross over, and then from there, it's going to ascend up the spinal cord, through the medulla, through the pons, through the midbrain, and then synapse here in the thalamus. That's a great big overview. So that's the gist of it. Okay, so this here, this is your second order neuron, right? Second order neuron exists. First order neuron comes in from STT, synapses immediately when it gets into the spinal cord, synapses with the second order neuron. Second order neuron, just like all second order neurons do, crosses over. Okay, that crossing over has a special name. Does anyone know what the crossing over is called? That's called, it decussates, or it's a decusation. So the second order neuron, we're going to say it decussates. D-E-C-U-S-S-A-T-E-S. And decussates, it's one of those words that we covered in the very first day of class. It's nothing more than white matter. Right? It's a decusation. Okay, second order neuron decussates or crosses over to the opposite side, the contralateral side, travels all the way up, synapses in the thalamus. Okay, and that's your second order neuron. And then your third order neuron, which is right here in the thalamus, that sends out somatosensory information to somatosensory cortex. Okay, primary somatosensory cortex or postcentral gyrus. And that is STT in a nutshell. STT gets sensory information, synapses immediately upon entry into the spinal cord, crosses over, second order neuron, travels all the way up. Remember we talked about any kind of lesion up here on the right side of the brain causing symptoms on the left side of the body? That's how that happens for the somatosensory piece. Does that make sense to everybody? So a lesion up here is going to cause deficits on the opposite side because it crosses over. And STT crosses over at the level of the spinal cord. Make sense? Yeah, I see some heads. Okay, go ahead.
So is that our motor neuron?
That is the third order neuron. Thank you. Yes, this is going to be my third order neuron. Yes.
Is the crossing over at the spinal cord like an essential component you need to know of that specific track?
Yes. We will do it over and over again. Yes. That's this STT you need to know forever crosses at the level of the spinal cord. And you'll see why as we go. It's important for patient presentation. Other questions? Yes, Ben.
So that top
dot in that
Here?
central gyrus, that's not a neuron, that's just showing that if you have like a lesion there, that's going to affect the STT.
Okay, so this third order neuron sends out the sensory information that it perceived here to the primary somatosensory cortex. So this area up here, let's just label it. I know it's, let's just say this is your primary somatosensory cortex, or your postcentral gyrus. So that information here from somatosensation is delivered to the primary somatosensory cortex, or your postcentral gyrus. Make sense? Is that better?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I put it in a specific place. It doesn't really have to be. These are very simplistic drawings. I'm just trying to represent what's happening. Let's just keep it simple. Trying to keep it simple. Okay, in reality, there are a lot of neurons in there, a lot of axons, a lot of connections. Yes, Taylor Grace. Probably do what? Depends on how tall you are. Yeah. Dr. Blair's got really long first order neurons going down to the same toe, right?
Yes. And then sort of motor, there's only two, right?
We'll get there. We're not there yet. Your head. Because this is only STT.
Right.
So we got to talk about DCML. Okay, DCML is next. And let's talk about DCML. So what happens with DCML, same thing. We have here our friend, the pseudounipolar neuron coming out here. Here's my axons. And again, this is going to represent DCML, dorsal column medial lemniscus. Okay, and here's my first order neuron. And this should have a little. Okay, everybody see where I am? Yes?
That's the first order.
That's your first order neuron. Yep,
the
and
other one is-
DCML. Sorry? It's what?
DCML.
DCML. Yeah, DCML. Hopefully you can read that with these markers on. And DCML tract carries what kind of information? Fine touch. What else? Anybody? Vibration. And proprioception. Correct. Thank you. Okay, so receiving this information from the environment. First order neuron for DCML. Neuronal cell body is sitting here in dorsal root ganglia. And DCML is a little different than STT. Yes?
Is fine touch something that proprioception?
Fine touch, vibration, and proprioception carried by DCML. Everybody got it? So everybody see where I am? Kind of putting things together a little bit. Now, in contrast to STT, DCML is just a little bit different. When it comes in, it is going to go straight up the spinal cord. It doesn't synapse anywhere in the spinal cord. Okay? It's actually going to synapse here in the caudal medulla. Okay? So it's going to synapse with a special neuronal cell body. We'll talk more about that later. For right now, I'm getting the concept through. There's a neuronal cell body there. Okay? And this is your second order neuron, right? And knowing this is a second order neuron, what's the second order neuron do?
So,
Crosses over. It decussates. Okay? So with DCML, information coming in, comes in, enters the spinal cord, and goes straight up. That first order neuron goes straight up. It doesn't synapse until it gets to the area of the caudal medulla. when it synapses with that second order neuron, then that information decussates to the opposite side. And once it decussates, it just travels straight on up to synapse with a neuronal cell body, my third order neuron in the thalamus. Again, this is my third order neuron. Okay, everybody got it? Synapse, yep.
What's it called again? Oh, that's
Third order neuron. Yeah, it's in a row, same as SCP, but one big difference. Okay, so there's that third order neuron in the thalamus, and then that third order neuron sends out axons that then synapse in the area of the primary somatosensory cortex, just like SCP. Questions? Mike?
So the first order neurons are stemming from the basal ganglia, or not?
The first order neurons are in the dorsal root ganglia. Yeah, I'll give you a picture of that, or a mental picture of that here in a little bit. Okay, this is still my great big overview. Just trying to get the basic concept. So STT comes in, spinal cord synapses immediately, second order neuron decussates and goes all the way up to the level of the spinal cord. STT decussates in the spinal cord. DCML, first order neuron, information comes in and then goes straight up to the level of the caudal medulla, then decussates, then goes to the thalamus. And third order neuron goes to the somatosensory cortex. Yes, Alicia?
So does the fact that it decussates explain why symptoms appear contralateral?
So because it decussates, symptoms will also always appear contralateral in the cortical region. Yes. In the cortex. Yes, absolutely. And everybody can see that, right? So if you have a lesion, I'll be right with you, Ben. If you have a lesion up here, you can see that it's going to affect feeling on the opposite side of the body, right? Ben?
Does the fact that it doesn't decussate until it gets to the medulla affect where on the body that affects you contralaterally?
Yes, you're getting there. Yes, we'll get there.
Okay.
Yes. So, in other words, if I have a lesion here at the level of the pons, you can see that both STT and DCML would be affected on the same side of the body. If I understand your question correctly, if I have a lesion here, right here, it's going to make a difference. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Okay? Yes, that's the big picture. Lesion in the spinal cord will often present with DCML ipsilateral and SCT contralateral. That's the big take home. Other questions? But these are great big overview, so we'll get there. That's it for the somatosensory ascending tract. So that's the afferent information coming in. Moving on, and you can see kind of the big point is that the information coming up to the level of the somatosensory cortex, both of these decussate. When we get to the somatosensory portion of the class, next class, we'll talk a lot more detail about what you're seeing here. But this is the great big overview. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to represent the motor information in red up here. So up here in my pre-central gyrus, okay, that is my neuronal cell body that exists in my pre-central gyrus. Okay, motor information, voluntary motor information coming out. What happens is the axon is sent out, okay, travels straight on down the cortex, through the midbrain, through the pons, into the caudal medulla. Okay, so this is efferent information coming out at the level of the caudal medulla. this axon decussates, or 90% decussates to the opposite side. Okay? Then, once it decussates to the opposite side, it comes straight on down the spinal cord and synapses with a neuronal cell body that exists in the spinal cord right here. Okay? And that neuronal cell body sends out axons that are going to innervate skeletal muscles. Somebody, I think it was Kelly Grace, you were asking about this. This is the 2-neuron system that we talked about. Okay, a little bit different than somatosensory. Somatosensory is 3 neurons, right? So this neuronal cell body up here, this neuron, from here all the way down to where it synapses in the spinal cord, has a name. It is called an upper motor neuron. Okay, your upper motor neuron starts in the precentral gyrus, sends out axons all the way down through the cortical region, decussates at the level of the caudal medulla, and then descends down the spinal column or spinal cord all the way to this other neuron. This other neuron is called your, any guesses? Lower motor neuron. You got it. Okay. This is your lower motor neuron. So 2 neuron system, upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron. Okay. Presentation for problems in either of those is going to be very different. We'll talk about that as time goes on. We'll talk about that in the motor portion of the course. Does anybody know another name for lower motor neuron? It innervates skeletal muscles. Have you heard the word alpha motor neuron before? Okay, lower motor neuron, I might use them interchangeably. Another word is alpha motor neuron. Okay. So again, big picture is that if somebody has a lesion that affected their left side up here in the brain, presentation of weakness is going to be contralateral. Okay. Realize, just to keep things simple, I put motor on one side and somatosensory on the other. But both somatosensory and motor exist on both sides. It would just be too crowded and messy a picture if I put them both on both sides. Paul?
What's underneath the alpha motor neuron?
Lower motor neuron.
Okay.
Yeah. Alpha motor neuron and lower motor neuron, I might say both words. I just want you to know that when I say alpha motor neuron, I'm just talking about that lower motor neuron because it innervates skeletal, so it's alpha motor. Okay? Other questions? We good? Okay. Again, great big overview of all the stuff we're going to talk about for the next 3 days. Now we're going to move on to the spinal cord, gray and white matter. Everybody with me? Okay. Let's go ahead and think about what I have here. So what I've tried to draw are, this is a spinal cord going straight up and down, okay, from here and here. And all I've done, this is a transverse section through the spinal cord, and then this is another transverse section, but I've just left out the middle part to it so you can see both. Okay, because what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to do somatosensory probably up here and then motor down here. Okay, so we'll label that here in a minute. Everybody got it? Does everybody see what I'm doing? This is just a cross section, a transverse section through the spinal cord. Okay. Does anybody remember what part of the spinal cord the gray matter is in? Is it this outside part or the inside part? Inside. Yeah, it's the inside part. This is all going to be, I'll just represent it as little dots. Okay. this is just gray matter. This is all your neuronal cell bodies in the CNS, okay? And I'll go ahead and do it for both. You can use a pencil or whatever. I'm just using gray color. So this is all representative of gray matter. We haven't talked about the spinal cord that much, so I'll spend a little time here. Does anyone know by looking at this which side would be dorsal and what side would be ventral? Let's just look at the top piece. Would this part up here be dorsal, or would this be dorsal? Any thoughts? I don't know.
Some part would be beyond, not dorsal.
So up here, whenever you see that the gray matter is touching the outside, that's going to be your dorsal. So this side up here is going to be dorsal, and this side down here is going to be ventral. Okay? So I'll just go ahead and label this as the dorsal. It's called the dorsal gray horn. Okay? And then if this is the dorsal gray horn, it's present bilaterally on both of these sections. And then down here, this is going to be my ventral gray horn. And as we go on, you're going to see that somatosensory information comes to the dorsal gray horn, and ventral gray horn contains the motor information. Questions? Everybody see that? Okay. Up here in the spinal cord, in the dorsal region, remember how we talked about sulci and fissures in the brain? Well, this is going to be in the posterior region, or the dorsal region of the spinal cord. You can say either. It's called your posterior.
Can't see it.
Thank you. Posterior, or you can say dorsal, whichever. Median means middle. It's in the middle. And since it's a little invagination, is that a sulcus or a fissure? Sulcus, right. So your posterior median sulcus. So it's another way you can identify the dorsal portion of the spinal cord, because it's got a little sulcus here. Whereas here, you've got a great big indent, right? That's going to be your anterior median fissure, because it's a lot bigger. Is that good? Okay, so let's say I'm going to do, say this, I'm going to start down the bottom. I'm going to put all the somatosensory tracts that we're going to talk about, or that we just talked about. Somatosensory tracts is going to be on the bottom here. And then up here I'll put the motor tracts that we just talked about, only because it gets too crowded if I put them all in the same cross section. Okay, so let's start here with the somatosensory. I just want to point out a few more things, and that is here, the spinal cord has regions. If you look at the regions, if you can identify dorsal versus ventral, or posterior versus anterior, it's going to be helpful, because it'll help you recognize where things are. Okay, so this area of the spinal cord is known as your dorsal columns. Okay, and then this area of the spinal cord has your anterior columns, and then this area here, bilaterally on the side, those are your lateral columns. Okay, so I'll go ahead and label that. That might help. This is going to be your dorsal columns. So this area of the spinal cord proper contains what's known as the dorsal columns. This area of the spinal cord, and again, columns, another word for white matter. This area, this white matter is known as your lateral column bilateral columns. And then this over here is going to contain your anterior column. Okay, so just 3 different regions of the spinal cord. You can identify dorsal versus ventral. You can figure out where things should be if you know the names. All right, let's start with DCML. DCML, I think I used, let's start with DCML. I use that color. So DCML actually has 2 dorsal columns that we're going to worry about. Okay, the first is going to be, so again, this is midline, so it's going to be duplicated on both sides. So this is going to be, you're going to have one of your dorsal columns here. Okay, and then you're going to have a duplicate on the opposite side. This is just one of the dorsal columns that you need to know about. Okay, it's in the dorsal column system, and those dorsal columns have a specific name. They are called your fasciculus. Fasciculus gracilis. Gracilis. Fasciculus gracilis. Not really going to worry about what fasciculus gracilis does right now, or why it's important that there's 2 of them, but you just need to know that this column, this area of white matter, specifically here in the spinal cord, is known as your fasciculus gracilis. Okay? And knowing that these are the dorsal columns, let's move on. Let's just talk about one more. The other one that you need to be aware of is just here in the dorsal area of the dorsal columns, there's another fasciculus you need to be aware of. In addition to fasciculus gracilis, you also have to know that there's a fasciculus cuneatus. Cuneatus. Anyone's going to ask. Okay, so you have fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. And both of those are in the dorsal column. So which somatosensory tract do you think they carry information from? DCML or STT? DCML, dorsal column medium lemniscus. So they're in the dorsal columns. So these carry information from the DCML system. Oh, it's a lot. I can see that. Okay, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break.